Culture is what you tolerate.
A leader in making has its own journey, starting from being a fresher to a mid-level senior professional and then going to the top. Right? What would be your uh, suggestion, advices?
First is just do what you have on your table good, to the best of your ability, forget about everything else. The second is, I think one has to be willing to take risk. And I think one has to therefore make oneself uncomfortable. By honesty, I mean intellectual honesty. So if you and I, we are talking, and if you don't agree with something that I'm saying, you should have the intellectual, and I should have the intellectual honesty to say that, look here, I don't agree.
So how do you make sure that everybody stays tuned to the goal? Welcome, Banmali, for this Inside the Mind of a Leader series at CXO Verse. And we are glad that you're here with us. So, you've done Harvard Business School, you've been at various leadership positions across industries, across companies like GE, like Tata Sons, and you bring a lot of experience to yourself. So, spending like 30 years, more than 30 years in the industry, what specific would you like to highlight has been a turning milestone or a story in your journey?
Yeah. So first, thanks a lot for having me. It's really a privilege. Um, I think leadership is to my mind, is very contextual. And in my journey over the last, in fact, more than 35 years now, it's been spread essentially across an American company, GE, a Scandinavian company, Wärtsilä, and an Indian company, Tata's. So I've got this exposure to the US, to Europe, and particularly Scandinavia and India. And I would say that leadership is very contextual. What is relevant from an American context is different from a Nordic context and in an Indian context. The US context is largely driven by technology being more efficient and bringing out with newer products and solutions, being at the cutting edge of in a manner of speaking, of defining what the world should be looking at, and that's what GE was all about. After all, it was started by Edison, who was the inventor of the light bulb. But the one more thing that GE was really good at was its belief in developing and nurturing good talent. And that is one thing that has stayed with me and stuck with me for life. That you don't develop and nurture talent by accident. You've got to have a systematic approach towards nurturing, developing, spotting, and encouraging talent. The Nordic piece, I think, is more about a society which is so egalitarian, which is in a sense so flat in terms of how people behave and how society is. It's all about being one with nature, being one with society. It's not about personal wealth creation and so on. In fact, that is frowned upon. But it's more about what you can do for the community and what can you give back to society and be, in a sense, serving society from that point of view. And that really gets to be, one of the reasons for business. And I learned a lot in the Nordics about just how, if you practice transparency in its extreme end, what wonders it does. So nothing is confidential, secret, from that point of view. And then, of course, if you look at our own Indian context, I think we still have a situation where demand far exceeds supply in many situations. I don't think brute market forces can define, how things should be. We have a lack of opportunity even for vast sections of our people. We need to recognize these realities, and business therefore has a lot more fundamental responsibility towards people. Because business in many ways in the Indian context, I would say, is privileged, and therefore it needs to exercise that privilege in a very careful and responsible manner. And that's one thing that I've learned in India and particularly at the Tatas.
Wonderful. I must say, Banmali, when I spent my 12 years with GE and I used to see as a leader, always a town hall used to happen like in a quarter
Mm.
with you. When I used to be in the line, the first person to ask you questions. And I would
Yeah.
always wonder, will I be having the courage at any point of the day that I will come up and ask you questions that I have in my mind? And I'm so glad I have this opportunity. I'm blessed to have you here today. You were talking about culture, right? So culture is what an organization defines to make sure that the people deliver, right? But at the same point of time, there is something that people need to also come up to make sure that the organization delivers to its best. So a leader in making has its own journey, starting from being a fresher to a mid-level senior professional and then going to the top, right? What would be your uh, suggestion, advices, basis how you have grown and evolved and also been a mentor to a lot of leaders, to these uh, current leaders, future leaders, from you?
So first, I think just talking about culture, I think, one has read many books, discussions, definitions of culture. The one that appeals to me the most is that culture is what you tolerate. And by that I mean that as an organization, if you make certain exceptions, or if you turn a blind eye towards a certain event or a decision or a fact that has happened, which may not be your stated sense of values or whatever, but you allow that to happen, that then defines your culture. The general belief is that this organization allows something like this to happen. The same thing can be applied to even an individual. If you make a certain choice in a certain manner and you let it pass or you ignore something that is happening around you, that then in many ways defines you. And I think one needs to understand that. It's not that what I need to be doing, but it's also, in fact, more about what I should not be tolerating. I need to stand up for every time consistently without missing a heartbeat. That really will define culture. From a youngster's perspective, to the second part of your question, the first thing I would say is, I don't think there's anything like planning for the future or career planning, etc., especially when you're starting. The first thing to do would be just do well in the job and the assignment that you have on your hand. Forget everything else. Just do well in that. Because if you do well in that, you set yourself up better for the next step to kind of move on to something more, something different, and so on. But if you're constantly looking 3 years ahead or 4 years ahead and don't do what you have on your table well, I think you've completely missed it. And that's a very common and I would say mistake that many youngsters make. So first is just do what you have on your table good to the best of your ability. Forget about everything else. The second is I think one has to be willing to take risk. And I think one has to therefore make oneself uncomfortable. And by that, I mean not just in terms of the areas that you work or the kind of jobs that you take, but even, let's say, changing cities. As a youngster, you should go out and move out into another geographic area, go into rural areas, make yourself as uncomfortable as you can, simply because it's that quote unquote discomfort that teaches you so much. And I think I would have learned the most when I've been in difficult situations, when I've been outside of my comfort zone. So, living in Finland, I'd never lived in minus 25, minus 30 degrees till I went and lived over there. How much it has taught me, how much it taught my family. My son was born there in Finland. I mean, now we love that place. Otherwise, it was this cold, dark corner somewhere in the world. So the second point, therefore, is make yourself consistently uncomfortable and take risk. And there's just one more thing I would say, which is to be honest about yourself. And I don't mean to say honesty in the routine, ethics and all of that. That's not the point. I mean, that's those are basics. By honesty, I mean intellectual honesty. So if you and I, we are talking, and if you don't agree with something that I'm saying, you should have the intellectual, and I should have the intellectual honesty to say that, look here, I don't agree, right? You don't have to be aggressive, you don't have to be rude, but make your point clear. Have the intellectual honesty to be able to stand up and say that I agree or I don't agree. Most of us, I think, become timid, we cow down, and we tend to, in a sense, read the room and say what is the most popular sentiment. So I don't think that will really help, particularly a youngster. Now, in order to be intellectually honest, you obviously, it's not just a feeling. You need to be well read, you need to be well informed, you need to be well studied. If you're not, then it's better keep your thoughts or your uninformed opinions to yourself. But in principle, you need to do enough reading, knowledge, etc., about the subject, have an opinion, and be intellectually honest to express it. So three things: do well in this thing that you're presently on,
Be
make
uncomfortable.
yourself uncomfortable so that you take risk, and have, for God's sake, have intellectual honesty to speak your mind.
Absolutely. And I think that's what even I see when I drive CXO Verse, that we can't just be a yes boss. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody has to have a say, but they have to come with facts and
Yes.
figures and how they perceive this is going to make an impact.
Quite right.
Yeah.
Quite right.
So then you've led multiple organizations, large organizations with many, many employees and also manufacturing facilities with so many large number of workers. So how do you make sure that everybody stays tuned to the goal? And what a leader at that level needs to possess to make sure that everybody is happy, productive, and the organization stays at the right path,
Yeah.
taking
I think
everybody together, basically, the entire
sure.
ship.
I think it's first, that's a very good question. And I think for the leader, therefore, to make sure that the organizations align, it's important for the leader to have clarity of thought. The more the clarity of thought with the leader, the better it will be to communicate that. What are the long term objectives? How do you break that down into shorter term objectives? Take feedback from people about some of the challenges that they might face while executing the desire or the clarity of thought that the leader might have. I often find that when the leader is muddled in terms of what he or she wants to achieve, that's when all hell kind of breaks loose. It also, by the way, helps in. So, if I am a leader, you are a leader, you have a certain view of the future, I may or may not agree with it as somebody part of your organization. Now, if I agree with your view, I will join you. I will be part of your journey.
Yeah.
If I don't agree with you, I'll step out and join somebody else with whom my views are more aligned. But if I don't know what your views are, then I'm just going to stay muddled and be doing things without clarity. So it helps in retaining those people who are aligned with you, letting go of those people who are not, and therefore you kind of move ahead as a cohesive unit. And one thing that I spoke about earlier, when you do this, to make sure that you don't make exceptions, the culture piece that we spoke about, because the moment you begin to make exceptions to your
Few
to
chosen
your
ones.
chosen clarity of thought, then I begin to wonder, but that's not what he said or she said. That's not what she had, indicated. So is
Yeah.
she really going the right way, or have I missed something? So that would be my suggestion to keep the organization aligned.
Very well said. Unless we have clarity of thought, we don't know what we're talking about and
Yes.
where we have to walk.
Yes. And I think as organizations grow, when you start small, personal leadership is very important because people see you, they watch you, they follow every move. When you grow even bigger, they still watch you, maybe not face to face, but maybe in photographs, pictures, films, etc. So personal leadership is always extremely important. The way you conduct yourself, the way you come across, the way you treat people, the way you say hello to people. I can assure you, when you enter the office and if you have a frown on your face, it is seen by 10 people, and 1,000 people somewhere behind know that, well, today the boss is not, or today the leader is not happy. What it also means is that as organizations grow, you need to have a more indirect form of leadership, which means you personally cannot go out there and reach out to everyone. So you therefore need to have other people who can convey your message, and processes and systems that convey the intent and the sentiment and so on. And this is where I think GE, to my mind, has been one of the absolute stellar leading companies in the world to kind of have those kind of processes and systems that really hold the whole organization together. And I mean,
And I
you've
vouch
also
for
been
it.
you yeah you
And I
you've
have
been.
so much credit to G for
Yes,
that. And
yes,
I mean, the kind of ability that G gave me was you can do anything.
yes,
So it is not about me
yes,
being a finance professional. I think today I'm running a business. I mean, if I would have not been in G, that confidence doesn't come to me.
yes,
Yeah, I think
that's
the
right.
kind of processes, SOPs we learned at G, the
Yes,
leadership that we learned at G, I'm able to implement here in my
correct.
new organization.
That's right.
So, coming to some industry talks, Banmali, now we have Make in India concept,
Hmm.
which was launched by our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi. But at the same time, we cannot live alone. Like you said in our previous session, that we are interdependent. We have to be globally integrated with everybody to sustain in the current scenario. So there were some JVs that Tata did with
Hmm.
Lockheed, with Boeing, right? But keeping the true values that India carries, along with the regulatory framework that India has, but
Hmm.
bringing the international standards on board. So, what is it that you really think an Indian business needs to keep up with the commitments, yet deliver, and getting the right commercials while also making sure that the international standards are met?
Yeah. Again, I think that's a great question. First, I think this whole Make in India, it's at a certain level, it's first just having pride in our own country, in the abilities and capabilities in our own country, and therefore having the courage to invest and to take quote unquote a risk in our own country. I think I would translate Make in India as as that sentiment. Because remember, every country has a made in US, you have a made in Japan, so every country has their
Yeah.
made in whatever. And the first thing is that, I mean, we in India also have our strengths. I mean, we are a large market, we have a lot of young people, as we spoke about, we have a lot of intellectual capital. We need to capture that, leverage that to serve our own country and at the same time serve the world as well. Now, for this, clearly there are areas where we would need partnerships. Some of it we will have to buy technology, some way we will have to partner. And I think you obviously kind of choose partners who are like minded, who follow the same kind of values and principles, and be clear with them as to why you're partnering with them. If the idea is if I partner with somebody to start making aeroplanes in the country, and ultimately we need to make planes here, let me be clear with the partner that this is my end objective. So please help us, and that's what it is. Rather than putting up a certain argument in the early stages and then changing that understanding later, which is what then ruptures partnerships and so on and so forth. And I would argue, and this is again where I think just the government to government relationships that India has now built, that helps in business to business partnerships as well. Because government and business now is in many ways is interconnected, you need that support. So that's how I think you go about forming partnerships, and I think it's worked out very well for us.
So, when Mari, now if we talk, I mean, any conversation would be incomplete if we're not talking about geopolitics
Hmm.
or technology,
Hmm.
right? And as the global economy shapes up, what do you think a leader needs to be aware of when it comes to geopolitical scenario or technology? What is it that a leader needs to be aware and needs to be doing to make sure that they are up and above uh, the game?
Yeah, I mean, just two quick things. One is, I mean, clearly one has to be much better, well read, well informed of how geopolitics is moving. You can't just stay in your business cocoon. You've got to understand all of that. And second, of course, keeping abreast with technology, and the most significant in today's time and age being AI. So just to understand what it means, what is it, what does it mean for my organization, and therefore take it forward. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, what would be one quick message from you to the audience that is doing you life?
Well, first, I think it's really heartening to see the younger generation having the courage to become entrepreneurs. I wish them obviously all the luck. I see a lot of confidence, so I think wish them all the luck to take their confidence, do good for their businesses and do good for the country as well.
Thank you so much, Banmali, for being here. It was lovely having you.
Thank you so much indeed.